Hello, I'm Jonathan Dunsky, author of the Adam Lapid Mysteries. On this channel, I talk about crime fiction that I read and enjoyed, and today I'd like to tell you about Psycho by Robert Bloch. Psycho is a novel that was published in 1959, and it is the basis of the famous movie Psycho that was directed by Alfred Hitchcock, one of the most famous movies ever made, and certainly, I believe, at least in the top three most well-known horror movies ever made. I have not watched the whole movie, I've never seen it, but of course I did see snippets of the movie, and I know about the final twist, and I knew about it before I began listening to the audiobook of Psycho. So let me tell you a bit about the book and what I thought of it, and then you can decide whether you want to read it as well. But before I do that, let me say a few words about Robert Bloch. He was a highly prolific author and writer. I believe he wrote short stories and a few dozen novels, and he also wrote for television. And he wrote all sorts of stories and books, science fiction, mysteries, horror, basically the sort of writer who could write about anything. And Psycho is his most well-known and enduring work. So in Psycho, there's a man called Norman Bates. He's in his 40s, and he lives in the Bates Motel. He lives actually in a house behind the motel, but he runs the Bates Motel, and he lives in his house behind the hotel with his domineering mother. And Bates is, he's, as I said, in his 40s, and he is basically never grew up entirely, or never had been able to move out of his mother's shadow, because, and of course we don't know too much about the way that he was brought up, but we learned that he was always a mama's boy, that he never had the gumption or the necessary will to move out of his house or get away from his mother and build a life for himself. And he is a very strange person indeed. He is interested in the occult, and he likes to read, and he's sort of secluded in his habits. He doesn't like being around people, and he's very nervous and awkward around women, and especially pretty women. And so that's the setup, at least as far as Norman Bates is concerned. In the beginning of the story, there's a woman called Mary Crane who works at a real estate agency, and one of the clients of that agency comes in to make a deal, and he pays for it in cash, $40,000, which is a lot of money today, but in 1959, when the book was published, it was a huge sum of money. And she's given the task by her boss to go to the bank and deposit this payment, but instead she decides to keep it for herself and to run away with it, which she does. She gets into a car and she drives away, and she has a sort of destination in mind. She has a sort of long distance relationship with a guy called Sam Loomis, with whom she is supposed to get married eventually, and she wants to drive to him with the money, because one of the reasons why they're not getting married is that he is in debt. So she thinks that this money, this $40,000, will allow them to get married faster. So she drives a long distance, trying to put a lot of distance between her and where she came from, where she stole the money. And at the end of a long driving day, it's raining and she's tired and hungry. She winds up at the Bates Motel, and she's the only guest there. And she gets into a conversation with Norman Bates, and this conversation turns to his mother and his life, because he's still living with her, as I said. And eventually this leads to what in the movie became the shower scene, one of the most famous scenes in movie history, in which Norman's mother stabs to death Mary Crane. and now Norman has to sort of tidy up after this murder. This is the background that I'll be giving you, because I think that most people already are aware of the shower scene in Psycho. Either they've seen the movie or they just saw that scene. They know what's going on there. And from then on, there are the characters of Sam Loomis and Mary Crane's sister, who now, and there's also a private detective who's been hired to recover this stolen money. All these characters are now interested in learning what happened to Mary Crane, because she's now disappeared. They want to know where she is, what she did with the money, where did this money go, and now there's this sort of search for her, and that search will eventually lead back to the Bates Motel. So that's the, let's say, background and the story in general, without giving the ending or any more spoilers. So I'll tell you what I thought about the book. First of all, I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated beautifully by, I believe the narrator is Richard Powers. And his voice was pitch perfect for the character of Norman Bates, and he also performed the other characters quite well also. So when the story is beginning, when we are introduced to Norman Bates, we immediately sense that something is very wrong with him, something is creepy, and it sort of gets under your skin how creepy he is and how creepy or strange his relationship with his mother is. And so this is quite effective writing, and you sort of get this creepy sense, this horror sense, without even a single drop of blood being spilled yet. And throughout the book, the character of Norman Bates and his mother, they're quite convincing, they're quite effective, and they're quite strange, and as I said, disturbing and creepy. The other characters, I did not feel that strong of a connection with. I did not find them to be strong characters, neither Sam Loomis or Mary Crane's sister, Lila. Mary Crane herself, by the way, was an interesting character, but the other characters I did not find that interesting. So that sort of lowered my enjoyment of the entire book. But the story is quite interesting and quick, and the characters of Norman Bates and his mother are so well drawn that they make the story quite enjoyable and interesting. The book is not long. I believe it's under 200 pages if you read it in text form. In audio form, it was about 5.5 hours, and it goes by very quickly. So it's not a book that will require a lot of time for you to just plow through. The book does show its age a bit, in particular at the end or near the end. And I also felt that towards the end, Robert Bloch made some choices that slightly lowered the tension, sort of began answering some of the questions before they needed to be answered. But I don't know if I would have felt this if I hadn't known the ending from just knowing how the movie ends. So this may have colored my let's say interpretation or my assessment of what Robert Bloch did then in let's say the final 20% of the book. Overall, Psycho is an enjoyable novel, and if you're the sort of person who likes reading a book that you've watched a movie adaptation of, this is a book that you should give this book a try. And if you're interested in horror or the sort of creepy crime thriller, this is a book that is historically important, and because it's enjoyable, I think you definitely should sample it and see if you like it. So I'll leave a link in the description below to where you can find a copy of Psycho, and let me know in the comments what you thought of the book if you read it, and what you thought of the movie. There were also a number of sequels that Robert Bloch wrote, and there were also a number of sequel movies. I haven't read or watched any of them, but this one I quite enjoyed. So thank you for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.